Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Simon Timpley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. Welcome to edition 104 of the Food Safety Fridays webinar program. Before we get on to today's webinar, the presentation, just a few things. The Food Safety Fridays program is sponsored by Metal of Toledo, AIB International, Trace Analytics, Safe Food 360, and Dmv Gl Business Assurance. And the two presenters today are from Dmv Gl Business Assurance. I'll be introducing you to them shortly. Just to say, I know some of your regulars know about it. You're already typing in the sidebar. Say hello, tell us where you're from, tell us what you do. That'd be great. Get to know each other. Try and save your questions till the end, because otherwise it's scrolling away and you sort of get lost and you have to retype the question. Yeah, it's being recorded today, as always, and we'll follow up afterwards. So if you miss a bit, we'll follow up with an email with the recording, slide deck, and the certificate. So don't worry about that. But yeah, that's it, I think, for now. So I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter from Dmv Gl Business Assurance, April Lefebvre and Arthur Allen. Good day, ladies. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
April, first, where you calling in from today?
Just outside of Atlanta, Georgia today.
So is it about 9 a.m., 10 a.m.?
It's 10, yep, 10 on the East Coast, yep.
And Arthur, where are you?
I am right outside of the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. I'm in a suburb called Fort Washington. It's in Maryland.
Very nice. Okie dokie. Right, if you want to get your presentation up on the screen, ladies, I'll tell the audience about next week, what we've got coming up. Right, okay. In the sidebar, you'll see a black and red Food Safety Live 2018. That's our big annual event, all online, our online conference. So I think we've got 10 speakers, and that's on Wednesday, the 17th of October. Free to attend. You'll get 10 slide decks, 10 webinars, 10 certificates. Sorry, it's the big bang, it's the big day. So register, click in there in the sidebar, and yes, you can join there. We've got some polls today, things like that. Like I say, the Q&A at the end. But for now, I'll leave you in the capable hands of April and Arthur.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to talk about some food supply chain trends and marketing. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Arfab, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. And why don't you go first and give them a little bit back on your background, and then I can go into what I'm going to talk about today.
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Arfa Alam. And as Simon said, April and I, we are both a part of the Dmv Gl North America Business Assurance Unit, although April and I both are on different teams. So I am in the Sustainability and Supply Chain Services team. I'm a project manager on that team, and we provide a number of services. But since today, April and I were going to be talking about common requirements in food safety audits as well as social audits, I'm going to be talking on that service, talking about that service of ours, which is social audit. So I'll hand it back over to April now so she can do her introduction, and she'll be kicking off our presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Arthur. Yes, I am April Lefebvre, and I am the supply chain specialist for the food and beverage team for Dmv Gl. And for over the past 2 years, I have been working with some of the larger brands in the food industry on managing their risk through supply chain assessment audits. So today I'm going to share with you some current trends that we are seeing in the market, cover some basic food safety requirements larger brands are looking for, and where we see the future of supply chains audits going. But first, let me give you a little bit of background about Dmv Gl. We are a global classification, certification, technical assurance, and advisory company. Our purpose as a company is to safeguard the life, property, and the environment. We are a global certification body and rated one of the top 3 in the world. And we are the global leader in all our business areas. Me and Alpha are in business assurance, but we also have maritime, oil and gas, energy, and software areas as well within Dmv Gl. Okay, so why we're all here today, right? Why are all the larger brands you're starting to see more supply or audits being requested from the larger brands? And why is that happening this day? It's because brands are not only realizing that they're as good as the products, as the ingredients and the materials that they use, but that they're also being judged on the actions of their suppliers as well. Consumers are not only looking for healthy and safe ingredients, they're also starting to consider environmental and ethical performances when making their choices as well. Another current trend that we are seeing in the food industry right now is a lot of the larger retail, grocery, and restaurant groups are starting to look for more small and local suppliers. Larger companies are understanding that these smaller suppliers may not be ready for a GFSI certification yet. So they are adapting and growing supplier approach. They want to help these small suppliers understand what it needs to be able to grow in the industry while managing their risk while working with them. So I kind of would like to get an idea and do a poll, if you don't mind, and see how many of you guys are currently GFSI certified. Simon, can you help me with that?
Sure, April. I've loaded the poll in the sidebar. The question is, are you GFSI certified, Global Food Safety Initiative certified to one of those standards such as BRC, SQF, FSSC, etc., etc.? So it answers possible yes.
Okay. Good. It looks like a large of yeses and everything. And I will say for those that are GFSI certified, larger brands, obviously they want that. They ask for that when working with other suppliers that are medium or larger in size. And then you're like, why isn't that enough? And honestly, it's because they see that the greater their brand, the bigger the brand, the bigger the risk is if something is to happen and how it could tarnish their brand. So they're wanting to take that initiative, take that extra step, and actually go and audit their suppliers on their own with their own auditors in-house, or they're using a second-party certification body to help and use their auditors to go and represent for themselves. But for those of you, I do see a small amount that are no. Actually, no, that's a pretty good no, or considering it. And for those smaller suppliers, maybe looking into getting GFSI certified or working with larger brands, let's go over some of the basic food safety items that would be covered in a supplier audit. So first is your building and facility. You need to make sure that you have a documented process and log on how you manage the risk of inside and out of your building. Your equipment. How well is your equipment? How often are you maintaining it? You have to have documentation on all of those as well. Your control points, it would be the next one. And everything, have you considered all your control points? And if so, what programs are you putting into place to prevent these? And everything. These are just some of the standard good manufacturing practices that are covered under GFSI, as well as it's a common that you see in all supply chain audits for brands as well. Now, with that being said, FSMA is changing the requirements a little bit. Their supply chain verification requirements is rolling out, and brands are starting to add some items to their supplier audits to meet these requirements. So here are some common items that brands are starting to add to supply chain audits for the FSMA requirements. Remember that it is a requirement that you have a PCQI trained personnel able to sign off on all preventive control records a minimum of every 7 days. Food fraud is a big topic that is coming up with the FSMA requirements, and also looking into radiological and economical hazards, as well as animal food and byproducts are being now considered in your backflow prevention. For those of you who are GFSI certified and you kind of want to know what your standard that you're certified to is doing and what changes they're making to meet the FSMA requirements, this is going to be a really good slide for you that we will give you after the webinar. That will give you a presentation. We actually have each standard broke down into what their changes are to meet the requirements. With BRC, we have actually currently just did a BRC webinar on the requirements and the changes for FSMA. So there will be some quick links to that webinar recording as well. And SQF has provided a frequent asked questions about what they're doing and everything for supply for the FSMA changes as well. So we have attached that document, and then we also have some more information for you on your foreign suppliers. So now that we know, what's the basics that they're covering on a food safety level, and also what is coming up new with the FSMA requirements, I wanted to give you just a few things that we see commonly missed on supply chain audits. And some of them are small, you wouldn't think about them, like one being floors, walls, and ceilings. You walk by that little chip in the flooring every day and don't think much about it because it doesn't hinder you for doing what you're doing on your job. But as, an auditor comes in and everything, these, walls and cracks and ceilings and everything, that could be leading to particles and could be a risk into your production. So keep an eye out on the floors and ceilings. Also, your pest control is a high risk area. Like we see a lot of suppliers making sure that they get their map up to date, making sure that they're reporting, they're logging what they're finding and everything in their traps and their preventive usage. Everything. And then where is the future of supply chain going? Digitalization is the future, right? We are already using blockchain in the industry. Dmv Gl actually has all their certificates blockchained now, so that you can scan the QR code and it can verify that it is a true certificate and can give you all the information of when the audit was done and everything like that. So we're already seeing it on the certificate side. It's coming for the product side too. We are currently, working on projects where we use the QR code on the actual item. So one of them that we're working with is a wine company. So you would scan the QR code on that wine, and it would actually backtrack all the way, tell you to the vendor it came from, its whole process, where it was. So it's coming where, you can find anything through a QR code on whatever products you buy. Also, virtual audits. Obviously, the benefits of a virtual audit are huge. The fact that you can save on travel costs, you won't have to send an auditor there or anything. The technology that we are currently working with is actually a technology that is an app on your phone. So the QA manager at the plant would download the app on their phone. There is a $20 stabilizing tool that you purchase, and they can actually use their phone to go through the audit with the auditor and everything and show them what they need to see. There's you can actually have multiple users on the same stream at the same time. So that's also a benefit as well as being able to flexibly plan a little bit more. And not to mention just on assessments, the savings, the time savings and cost savings that virtual audits will give you. But think about on your corrective actions and stuff like that. If there was a latch that wasn't clicking on a door and we had, that was marked as a nonconformity, the auditor has to go back and open the door and close it to see if it latched. They don't have to go back on there on site anymore. We can actually live stream it, see that door close and open, and check that off as a corrective action. So that is pretty much where we're at on the food safety side of supply chain audits. So I'm going to hand it over to Arfa so that she can give you more on the social responsibility and supply chain.
Thank you, April. So yes, as April said, I am now going to briefly get into social responsibility audits and some of the common audits that we see among food brands. And so we'll just get started. And please bear with me for just a minute. I am having trouble moving to... Oh, there we go. All right. So we've seen in recent years that large brands such as Costco, Walmart, and Nestle, they're increasingly requiring their suppliers, including their food suppliers, to undergo social audits on a regular basis. Why is that? Well, April touched on this a little bit during the beginning of the presentation, but we know that large brands are focusing more and more on their supply chains now from a social responsibility perspective, because they want to, first and foremost, they want to uncover risks in their operations. And in addition to that, it has become a customer demand now. Customers are a lot more socially aware compared to customers in the past, and they want to know that the products they're purchasing have been produced in a socially responsible way. In addition to this, there is also a lot of regulations in place, that require some sort of social responsibility measures in place. And then beyond that, brands want to protect themselves. They want to protect their reputation. And so because of this, we're seeing that increasingly large brands are engaging suppliers around these risks and vulnerabilities. So before I jump into what some of the common social audit schemes are, I am just curious, how many of you are in an organization that has already conducted social audits, either on your own, because you guys decided to take that initiative by yourself, or because it was due to a customer requirement? So there should be a poll in place.
Yeah, there is. I've loaded the poll. Has your organisation conducted a social audit either on its own or because of a customer requirement?
Yes, and I can see that it looks like it looks fairly split between yes and no on this audience. So it seems like about a third of you have gotten social audits done, a third of you haven't, and then about 20% are not sure what a social audit is, about 10% are considering it.
Yeah, it sort of flipped from food safety audits. You'd find the majority now in 2018 have, are GFSI certified, but obviously social audits are a lot newer, and people most people have not had one or don't even know what one is,
Yeah, and that's certainly not surprising, because again, the universe of social audits and brands requiring their suppliers to go through a regular social audit, that is a relatively new thing. And in fact, we see this all the time, where a client comes to us and they say that X brand wants us to get this audit done by this date, but we're not exactly sure what that is. So that's what I'm going to jump into now with the next slide. So some of the most common schemes we're seeing these days that brands are wanting to have their suppliers either certified to or to be in compliance with are SMETA and SA 8000. So the SMETA audit is the audit that's been developed by SEDEX. SEDEX, as some of you may know, they're an NGO dedicated to social responsibility, and they've developed this great database that eases the burden on suppliers facing multiple audits, because you can upload your audit reports onto this database and then share it with multiple customers. So that is one big advantage of being a SEDEX member or having access to their database, is that once you have an audit done, you can have it uploaded into that database, and it's there for you to share with as many end clients as you want. And of course, their second primary goal is to drive social responsibility. It's to drive improvements in the ethical performance of global supply chains. So SMETA actually stands for SEDEX Members Ethical Trade Audit. And SEDEX members cover a range of sectors and types of brands and retailers, but the audit it essentially covers it's pretty much a standard social audit that it covers what you would expect. So labor and human rights, health and safety, business ethics, and environment. I should make a note here, though. There are two types of SMETA audits. There is a 2-pillar audit and the 4-pillar audit. The 4-pillar audit is more comprehensive. As the slide states, the 4-pillar audit, it does very comprehensively cover labor, health and safety, business ethics, and environment. The 2-pillar audit focuses primarily on labor and health and safety. It has a very small environmental component. It does not cover ethics, and it also covers a few other things such as homeworking and subcontracting, and those are also covered in the 4-pillar. But basically, the 4-pillar, the main point is that the 4-pillar, it's the more comprehensive audit. And then we see a lot of brands asking their suppliers to get the SA 8000 certification as well. So SA 8000 is from Social Accountability International, which is also an NGO that advances human rights. And this audit covers, again, a lot of the same labor and health and safety issues. So it's broken up into 8 areas of focus, which are child labor, forced labor, health and safety, freedom of association, discrimination, disciplinary practices, working hours, and then remuneration. And all of this is looked at through the lens of the company's management system. So basically the entire audit, it's framed around looking at these 8 issues through a company's management systems. And I forgot to mention in the last slide, I'll go back for a second. I forgot to note that SMETA is based on the ETI code of conduct, whereas the SA 8000 audit, it's based on mainly the ILO's core labor conventions, as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN. So, as you can see from the description of these two schemes, the SMETA and the SA 8000, the common requirements covered in social audits typically center around four things, right? We have the social side, which is labor and human rights, and that relates to things around hours of work, wages, child labor, forced labor, grievance mechanisms, etc. And then we have health and safety. So that's looking at, that may cover issues such as looking at an organization's health and safety permit, seeing what kind of health and safety training is in place, looking at, out for things like PPE, are workers wearing personal protective equipment, etc. And then social audits will also typically include an environmental component. And then the last part usually focuses on business ethics. So looking at a company's code of ethics or code of conduct, seeing what rules they have in place around things like bribery, corruption, fraud. Have any of those things ever occurred within an organization, etc. And then finally, before we move into the Q&A portion of our presentation, some of, this is a very, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to touch very briefly on what some of the common issues uncovered during social audits are. And again, this list could vary depending on the part of the world you're in. I know we have people joining us from all over the world right now. This list again, it's not exhaustive, but these really are some of the topics that I guess we get the most questions about, or we find that there are often findings related to these issues in social audits. But again, this list may look a little different depending on what sector you're in and also what part of the world you're in. So hours of work, that always tends to be a big thing. I think no matter where you are in the world. And what I mean by that is some countries have regulations in place to monitor hours of work, and some countries do establish caps on how many hours of work of regular work are permitted in a week and how many hours of overtime work are permitted in a week. And some countries don't. And typically most standards, they say that 48 hours of regular work is acceptable, and you shouldn't go over 60 hours of work a week with overtime. And we recognize that this can be an issue for organizations because we do live in the real world, right? And so sometimes there are production needs or demands from the clients that necessitate a facility. They operate beyond the regulations that are in place. And I think that most often now, the way CBs, they manage this issue is it's not enough merely to look at the hours of work and mark it as a point of compliance or non-compliance, but you really have to look at the full context and see, okay, if there is overtime, excessive overtime that is occurring, why is that happening? And are there protective measures in place? For example, is there a collective bargaining agreement in place that institutes some sort of safeguards that help manage and mitigate that risk? So that is one common issue that I would say comes up no matter where you go in the world, right? Because overtime happens everywhere. Another common issue is the point of freedom of association. So again, this is another area that varies in terms of laws and regulations. It varies tremendously from country to country, region to region, culture to culture. So are workers aware of their rights? Does the company communicate these rights to the workers? Do they not communicate them? Do they actively hinder these rights? Is there a freedom of association policy in place at the company? Is there a union on site? What is the relationship like? If there is a union, what is the relationship like with the workers and management? Grievance mechanisms refers to the channels that are in place to facilitate communication between management and workers. In an ideal world, there would be multiple channels in place that give workers the option to communicate any grievances, any concerns or ideas they have to management with an option to communicate anonymously. So sometimes you'll see some companies, they have some sort of portal on the company intranet for workers to communicate. Or if a company has an anonymous channel in place, it may consist of something like a hotline or an anonymous email. So that's what grievance mechanisms refers to. And of course, the issue here is that not all companies have formal channels in place, or something we see a lot is that companies will say, well, we're like a family, so there's no need for that, or we just have an open door policy in place. But still, it's always important for the worker to feel safe in going to management. And so the auditor will want to see if, okay, what channels are in place, and are these channels available to the workers in a way that allows them to communicate feeling safe, and if should they want to go anonymous, do they have that option? And then the last common issue I noted here is health and safety training. Again, certainly not the last common issue you'll find in an audit, but this just refers to the fact that not all companies are consistent with health and safety training. Sometimes, just recently I was reading a report from an audit in which the company, they had represented that they provide a health and safety training when a new employee starts. But then after that, they don't provide any refresher trainings. And of course, we all know that health and safety regulations are also constantly changing. And beyond that, it truly is, it's a health and safety risk if you have a workforce where people have been working for years, but they've not had any refreshers on health and safety. So that is a summary of just some of the common findings that are uncovered in social audits. And oh yes, I had this one last slide on what seems to be the most I wouldn't say the most popular, social audit scheme, but one that we have seen become increasingly more and more popular in recent years, especially in the food and beverage sector. It's SMETA. And the reason for that seems to be, as I mentioned before, the 4-pillar audit. It is very comprehensive because it covers all areas: labor, health and safety, environment, and business ethics very well. SMETA it's a very reputable scheme. It's well recognized by brands around the world. It involves relatively fewer mandates compared to other popular schemes like SA 8000. And finally, I think one of the biggest selling points is the fact that SMETA it's the audit scheme of SEDEX, and SEDEX has, again, this wonderful database online where you can upload your reports and then share it with multiple customers. So company X, they could have their SMETA audit done, today, and then tomorrow when 5 of their customers say, hey, you need to get a social audit performed as soon as possible, they can say, we've already gone through SMETA and our report is available on the SEDEX database for you to review. So that was my final slide. And I think now I'll hand it back over to Simon. And I guess we'll be facilitating the Q&A portion, right?
Yeah, thanks very much, Arthur and April. If you could both switch your webcams on, then we'll end the slide presentation and then we'll get on to the questions. Okay. Right. So obviously some of you are GFSI certified, some working towards, and on the social side, SMETA and the like, obviously some of you further behind, but obviously we'll be increasingly getting demands from customers, etc., in the supply chain. So the first one, we have Benson. Question: in the case where grievance mechanism is not in place, what will be the alternative? Because I believe it helps strengthen the organisation workforce and also its growth.
So, typically when that is identified as a finding in an audit, so say a company, they just have nothing in place, then there is no alternative to a grievance mechanism, right? You either have one or you don't, and if you don't have one, then the corrective action is to develop one. So the example I had given was that a lot of companies, they'll leave suggestion boxes outside of break rooms or lunch rooms. That's a really good anonymous way for a worker to leave feedback. They'll have some sort of portal available on the company intranet where workers can leave comments. They may have a hotline in place that you can call, like a confidential or anonymous hotline. Maybe there's an email address. And then in addition to that, most companies, they do have some sort of procedure in place where you could communicate with HR and escalate a grievance that way.
Mm-hmm. Also, just on a side note, in BRC issue 8 now, I know it's related to food safety, but you have to have a what we call a whistleblower procedure. So if an employee sees something that could be a risk to food safety, then they can, without fear of their job, go and report that to a senior manager, etc.
And that's a requirement in a lot of social audits too. It's usually covered in the business ethics side.
Okay. A question from James. Would an audit report submitted to SEDEX cost my customers money to retrieve?
So the way that works is if you have a SMETA audit done, it's really up to their to the company or their end client if they want the report uploaded into SEDEX. If you do want the report uploaded into SEDEX, starting November 1st, actually, so just a couple of weeks, they will be charging fees for that service. So there will be fees associated with that, and they're relatively small fees. They're all depending on whether or not you're a SEDEX member. The fee does differ, but the fees are all under, I think they're all under $200. So it's not a very significant fee, but if you do want your report uploaded as of November 1st, you will have to pay that fee. But I think the question was to retrieve the report. So when the audit is done and the auditor has completed the report, the auditee will receive the report anyways, whether or not they're uploading it into database. The auditee would still receive the final report from the CB that conducted the audit.
Yeah. Okay, Irina, let me see if you can see that one. Please describe a bit more about the website where audit reports are posted. Will reports of any standard, SMETA or SA 8000 be displayed there? Does the SEDEX database include SA 8000 or just SMETA?
So as far as I know, and I can double check this, the SEDEX database, it's just for, you can upload documents related to the audit. So for example, if an SAQ, a self-assessment questionnaire, was conducted by a facility as part of the audit preparation, you could upload that document or other documents related to the audit. But in terms of audit reports, I think the SEDEX website, it only allows you to upload SMETA reports. I think that the format, actually, the way you upload the report, it's uploaded line by line, and it's formatted to the SMETA protocol.
Right, that's clear. Amy's just confirming, Amy Brooks, if you are certified, BRC certified, you can use the BRC reporting system for free to cover your whistleblowing. Thanks, Amy. Irina is just asking again, is it mainly a customer requirement, or is there any international requirements for, social accountability audits, etc.?
I'm sorry, I'm just
Irina is asking, are social accountability audits, etc., a customer requirement, or is it an international standard? What's driving social accountability compliance?
I mean, I think there are several things driving it. There are a lot of international standards in place, right? Like the IFC performance standards that cover social responsibility within an organization. And now increasingly, organizations, they do look to international standards like the IFC performance standards or the ILO labor conventions, or so often companies, they will quote the UN, I'm forgetting the acronym, the UNCHR's statement on human rights, or the UN development goals. So certainly companies are looking to international standards. I don't think there are any such international requirements, but more and more companies are seeing that it is good to comply with these international standards, not just for the sake of brand reputation or to make their stakeholders and customers happy, but because these frameworks are in place as guides on how you can responsibly produce your products. And as I think it was Irina who asked the question, as you noted in your question, even if an organization, they don't take the initiative themselves to have the social audit done, they will often have some end client who does want them to engage in a social audit. So that's really, it's a number of things that are driving this trend.
Okay. Dana, my voice is coming out from somewhere again. Dana, the only document you're handling in your blockchain, this is Dmv Gl's blockchain, is it just audit reports? Can you see the question there?
Sorry, I didn't turn my mic on. Sorry. Yeah, as of right now, our blockchain is on the certificates and it links to the actual report, and not any documentation that is required for that report and everything, not the customer's personal documentation that goes into the actual GFSI report. It's just a QR code on the certificate that links back to the report when it was done and can give you that it's current and up to date. And do I see it in the future? I mean, possibilities are kind of endless with blockchain and everything. So I really think it would probably depend on the customer stuff too, of what they want to relay in the blockchain. Do they want all their documents linked to the QR code or anything like that? I definitely think it's something it could be done, but I think it would depend on what customers' needs are at that time and how much they want to share.
Okay, thanks, April. Maria, I'm not sure if that's a question. Maria Bernardes, food fraud is obligatory to module 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, any further questions while we have April and Arthur? We have got some time if you have any questions. So when you have a social, like a SMETA audit, is it just the same as the same process as a GFSI audit? You have the audit, you get write-up non-conformities or areas for improvement, and you have to close those out, etc. And so it's part of continual improvement.
Yes, it's the same process where you work with the CB ahead of time to prepare for the audit. They'll send you a list of documents they would want to review, send you an agenda ahead of time, so that the auditee has an idea of what to expect, and then the audit is executed. And then after the audit is executed, the report is written by the audit team. It goes through technical review, and the final report along with the findings, which for SMETA, it's called the CAPR, so the CAP report basically. The auditee receives that. And again, just like any other audit scheme like the GFSI, there are guidelines developed. They're actually in some of the SMETA guidance documents that you can find online for how long you have to remediate an issue, and that of course varies depending on the type of issue and the severity of the risk. And again, depending on the issue, the non-compliances are either closed through a desktop review or through a follow-up audit.
Right, okay. And I was going to ask this question myself, the frequency. Is it yearly yeah?
Yeah, so SMETA is actually, it's not a certification. It's an audit scheme that measures social compliance with certain issues, but it's not a certification scheme. You don't receive any sort of certificate at the end of it, and there's also no expiration date attached to it. As far as the validity of the audit, that's really up to the organization or their requesting customer if they want to attach an end date to it. There are some organizations that say to their suppliers, you have to have a SMETA audit done every 3 years, right? Or every X amount of years. But on its own, it's not a certification and there's no expiration date.
I think a lot of the questions that I'm aware of that come through the supply chain are, firstly, are you a member of SEDEX? Are you a member? And obviously, if you're a member, as far as I know, you have to complete a self-assessment questionnaire.
Thank you, yes.
And then the second question is, have you undertaken a SMETA audit? So if you can say to customers, we're members of SEDEX, there's our membership number, and we've conducted a SMETA audit, I think that in itself, the customer can be assured to a certain extent that you're in a process of self-analysis and looking to improve, etc. But just a question, I wonder, obviously they're thinking, why is there no certificate? Is it that there's no pass and fail, or why is there no certificate?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I certainly can't speak on behalf of SEDEX, of course, but I think the idea is that you're measuring social compliance, and it's a model of continuous improvement, right? So whenever, even if you go through SMETA audit without any findings, or maybe you do end up with a couple of findings, the idea is that organizations, they're supposed to be continually improving. And so from my perspective, maybe that's why there's no certificate attached to it. Or I don't know if, by design, they just decided this isn't going to be a certification program. It's just going to be an audit, a snapshot of where a company is with respect to social compliance.
And maybe also because there's things like health and safety in there. There's a big sort of if you're certifying something and saying, yeah, you've passed, then something needs to happen.
And those are areas also, they're very fluid, right? Like their regulations and standards are constantly changing. I think that might be part of it as well.
Okay, let's move on then. Thiruvarangan, is social responsibility audit a requirement of any GFSI certified standard?
So, is a SMETA audit part of a GFSI standard? No, not at this time. There are some of requirements in the standard that kind of cross and sense with some of the things that Arfa was talking about, but as an actual, is a SMETA audit required for her certification? The answer is no.
No. Yeah. Okay. And I think, Tina, it's along the same lines. SMETA audit is for all three bodies. It's not required. It's nothing to do with BRC, SQF. In fact, it's totally separate from GFSI.
Yeah. It's a separate identity.
Yeah. But as you rightly said, that there is some crossover in requirements.
And one point I wanted to make is you don't have to be a SEDEX member to have a SMETA audit conducted. That's a question we get a lot, especially sometimes from supplier companies who have tight budgets. They're concerned that, do we have to become a SEDEX member now and pay the membership fees because Walmart wants us to get a SMETA audit done? And the answer is no, you don't have to be a member. You can get a SMETA audit done even if you're not a part of SEDEX.
The only benefit to that membership, well, one of the benefits is that you can then accept and link to people that deal with your customers, and automatically they get updated. It saves you a bit of admin, doesn't it? I don't think it's a high cost to be a member of SEDEX, but is it? I don't think so.
I'm not sure what, I know the membership fees, they vary depending on the type of membership, but I know it's not a very significant cost.
Right.
Okay. Kenley, can SMETA audits work for HACCP certification as well?
They're two different things in itself. SMETA is more on the social responsibility, the procedures and processes that are set up for your employees and stuff. HACCP is more about your hazard control points of your production line and managing your risk in that. So those are two separate kinds of certifications and standards, so they would not go together.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody does have further questions, either now or maybe next week or in a few months, you might get asked by a customer, just dig out this PowerPoint that we'll send you, and then the contact details are there for April and Arthur, and they'll lead you through the process. Because it can be, when it's new to you, you don't even know what it is, or you don't know what you're being asked, it can be difficult, but there is help available. Sorry, go on, Arthur.
No, I was just going to say we would love to hear from you guys. As Simon said, our email addresses there at the end of the PowerPoint presentation that Simon will be emailing everyone. So we would love to hear from you guys, also get your feedback, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have related to this presentation or our other services.
Yep.
Okay. Right. Well, look at that. We're almost bang on the hour, so perfect timing. So April and Arthur, thanks very much for this, sharing your time and your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thank you for the great questions.
Yes.
Super. All right. And if we do get any further questions, we'll pass them on to you. Okay, so hope to see you both again soon. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Right, final thing, I'm just going to issue the certificate. It's in the sidebar now. So for this session, you do receive the certificate. Just click download now. You can download that from Dropbox. Either print and sign your name or open in a image editing software such as Microsoft Paint. And you can type your name and print it. Okay, thanks very much. Happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend. And hope to see you on our next, it's Food Safety Live on the 17th of October. That's a full day. I will put it in the sidebar again. In fact, I'll put it in the follow-up email. So register for that. We've got 10 back-to-back presentations on a variety of topics that day. So either join us for the full thing or dip in and out, whatever. Okay, thanks very much. Take care and see you soon. Bye now.